December 17, 1944, 5:30 hours. Hansfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank's engine coughed, shuddered, and then died. SS Oberscharfer Benura Joachim Piper slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the metallic clang echoing through the pre-dawn stillness. His driver, Unsharv Bear, struggled to restart the 700 horsepower Maybach engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge was empty. Herr Oberenurov Bear called up from his compartment, voice taut with barely restrained panic. The reserve tank was also dry. Piper climbed down onto the frozen Belgian soil. Around him, the most formidable armored spearhead the Wehrmacht had assembled for Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Ardennes Offensive, stood immobilized, 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 elite Waffen-SS troops, all paralyzed by a lack of fuel. Through the morning mist, he spotted the abandoned American position ahead, Hansfeld, a vital supply depot for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. The Americans had withdrawn so swiftly they left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still warm in metal cups, and lined up like a gift from the gods of war thousands of olive-drab jerry cans. Piper approached cautiously, almost reverently. His adjutant, Hauptmann Hans Gruller, pried one open, inhaling the high-octane gasoline as his men scrambled to refuel the tanks. Piper walked among the stockpile, counting 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire combat group to the Meuse River, potentially turning the tide of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel at this single depot than most German divisions had received in 6 months. Yet standing amidst this bounty, Piper felt a chilling realization: if the Americans could afford to leave such supplies behind, guarding them with apparent indifference, then the war was already effectively lost. Germany had not merely miscalculated, it had fundamentally misunderstood its enemy. 6 months earlier, in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented a report that should have halted all offensive operations. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Luna plant, which produced 175,000 tons in April, yielded only 5,000 tons by September. Hydrogenation plants at Pitts, Blemmer, and Brock operated at under 10% capacity. The numbers foretold inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil, while Germany, including synthetic fuel and captured Romanian fields, managed only 33 million, less than 2% of American output. The Third Reich attempted mechanized warfare on essentially horse-drawn logistics. Major Friedrich Simmmann of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had calculated that the Ardennes offensive would require 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler allocated 5 million gallons, but transportation bottlenecks delivered only half. The High Command's plan relied on seizing enemy supplies, a strategy reflecting desperate weakness rather than strength. Meanwhile, American forces had built a petroleum pipeline across France, Operation Pluto, and the Red Ball Express, a massive convoy network delivering 12,500 tons of supplies daily. By December 1944, U.S. forces in Europe consumed 1.2 million gallons daily while receiving 1.4 million, accumulating reserves even in combat. Piper, at 29 one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, a Knight's Cross holder and veteran of the Eastern Front, knew fuel's value better than most. His group had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point of the Ardennes offensive. On December 14, 2 days before the attack, Piper attended the final briefing at Tondorf. General Sepp Dietrich, commanding the 6th SS Panzer Army, stated plainly, "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." Piper's allocation was 31,000 gallons, sufficient for 50 miles, while the distance to the Meuse was 65 miles. Failure was baked into the plan. On December 16, as his column advanced, Piper issued strict instructions: tanks in single file to conserve fuel, engines off if halted longer than 5 minutes, and capturing American fuel dumps was priority 1, above all tactical objectives. The contrast with American logistics was stark. That morning, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion, just 20 miles away, recorded in his diary, received 8,000 gallons of fuel, third delivery this week, storage already at capacity. By 5:30 on December 16, German artillery opened Operation Watch on the Rhine, expending more ammunition in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire operations earlier in the war. Yet even this show of force masked critical shortages. Piper's column began moving at 7 o'clock, already behind schedule. Narrow, often unpaved country lanes replaced the highways shown on German maps. Traffic jams formed as vehicles designed for the Russian steppes struggled through Ardennes forest roads. At Lanzarote, a single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon of 18 men delayed the most powerful German armored column for nearly 10 hours. Precious fuel burned while vehicles idled. By dawn on December 17, when Piper reached Hansfeld, his column had traveled 20 miles and used 40% of their fuel. The American depot, technically a forward Class 3B supply point, contained more than the monthly fuel allotment for a panzer division. Hauptführer Hans Gruller later testified, "We found jerry cans stacked 3 meters high, extending nearly 200 meters. Americans had made no attempt to destroy them." The fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline mixed with 80-octane motor fuel. Our Tiger engines, designed for 74 octane, suffered minor problems due to its quality. While refueling, further revelations emerged. Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffman discovered shipping manifests in the depot office. He could read English from his pre-war import business experience. The documents traced the fuel from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, through the Channel to Normandy, and then 400 miles overland to Hansfeld, a journey of over 6,000 miles in less than 6 weeks. Hoffman showed the papers to Piper, who read them twice, turned pale, and silently crumpled them. Private Ernst Kara also found Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day. A single pipeline delivering more fuel daily than Camp Gripper Piper would use in the entire offensive. To comprehend the shock of Piper's discovery, one must understand Germany's fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombing had reduced synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Luftwaffe was grounding aircraft for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training had been cut from 250 flight hours to 60 hours. The German Navy's surface fleet had effectively ceased operations. U-boats were fitted with snorkels to conserve diesel by running on batteries longer. On the home front, German civilians had not seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline was so precious that the Gestapo investigated black market theft of individual liters. Farmers were returning to horse-drawn plows. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 67% of the world's oil. The East Texas oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe. American refineries were operating at such capacity that Standard Oil was experimenting with new petroleum byproducts simply because they had excess crude. With the 50,000 gallons captured at Hansfeld, Piper's columns surged forward. They reached Billingen by noon on December 17, capturing additional supplies, rations, ammunition, and most importantly, maps showing other American fuel depots in the area. But the maps revealed a disturbing truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every major crossroads had a depot. The U.S. First Army alone had 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Piper pushed on to Lineville, where his forces would commit the Malmedy massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this war crime was connected to fuel desperation. Piper later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport prisoners. By evening on December 17, Piper's spearhead reached Stavelot, site of a major American fuel depot containing over 2 million gallons. Here was enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had received warning of the German approach. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The Stavelot depot contained 2,189,000 gallons of gasoline in jerry cans stacked across 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17, as Piper's advanced guard approached, Captain Brewster gave the order. Engineers poured gasoline trails between the stacks. White phosphorus grenades were distributed. Technical Sergeant Paul Solis threw the first grenade. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100 feet within minutes. The entire depot was an inferno. Piper's lead tanks arrived to find a pillar of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sky. The fire would burn for 3 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Piper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Ante Furuvber described the scene. The Obersturmführer stood on his tank turret watching the flames. He said, "Nothing for perhaps 5 minutes. Then he climbed down and told me they can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?" Across the Ardennes, American engineers were destroying fuel dumps rather than risk capture. At Tuapon, 1.1 million gallons burned. At Spar, 2.5 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The ability to casually destroy millions of gallons was rooted in a supply system beyond German comprehension. The Red Ball Express had delivered 412,000 tons of supplies using 6,000 trucks operating round the clock. Each truck consumed 40 gall daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received monthly. By December 1944, the motor transport service employed 230 truck companies operating on color-coded routes. The system delivered 20,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for 1st Army, recorded on December 18, fuel receipts yesterday: 1,847,000 gallons. Fuel issued 1,623,000 gall. Net gain to reserves 224,000 gall. The pipeline system was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. A network of pipelines extended inland. The Cherbourg-Paris line delivered 800,000 gallons daily. The Seine line moved 650,000 gall. By December 1944, Allied forces in Northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons daily while receiving 8.22 million gallons. They were building reserves during offensive operations. As Piper pushed deeper into Belgium on December 18, the impossibility of the German position became clear. At shore, they captured another depot. 5,000 gallons consumed in 3 hours of combat. Tiger tanks consumed 2.5 gall per mile in battle. Panthers burned 1.5 gall per mile. In the difficult Ardennes terrain, consumption increased by 40%. Helped Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, recorded, by noon on December 18, we had consumed 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit. The Americans monitoring German radio traffic through Ultra intercepts knew Piper's fuel situation. General Courtney Hodges ordered all units. Enemy critically short of fuel. Destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture. That same day, American C-47S flew 316 sorties delivering supplies to Bastonia, including 160,000 gall of fuel. Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Piper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. By December 19, as Piper's forces engaged defenders at Stoumont, the fuel crisis had become critical. Tanks were being abandoned with empty fuel tanks rather than from battle damage. Piper consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, enough for one engagement or retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners were preparing for January operations. Brigadier General Morris Gilland requested 245 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without discussion. The contrast extended beyond quantity. American vehicles were standardized for efficiency. Sherman tanks consumed 0.8 gal per mile versus the Tiger's 2.5. American trucks got 8 m per gallon fully loaded. Parts were interchangeable. Maintenance simplified. German forces operated a bewildering array of captured and manufactured vehicles with different requirements. French tanks needed different oil than German Panthers. Soviet trucks required different parts than German Opels. Each complication multiplied logistical difficulties. On December 20th, Piper received a radio message. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. Piper called his commanders together. Sturmbannführer Vera Pertka was blunt. We have fuel for perhaps 20 kilometers. The Meuse is 30 kilometers away. According to H.T. Murat-Grüller's testimony, the Obersturmbannführer said, "Gentlemen, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at Hansfeld, which seemed miraculous, was nothing to them. We cannot win." This realization was spreading. General Asso von Manteufel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed. Before it began." Colonel Friedrich von Donder, captured December 23, told interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance?" By December 21, Piper was surrounded at Lays, his tanks immobile. American forces surrounding him, 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, 3rd Armored, had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21 alone. Piper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The American response demonstrated industrial warfare at its peak. Patton's Third Army pivot north required 350,000 gallons just for redeployment. Considered impossible by German standards, yet accomplished in 3 days. December 23 brought clear weather. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties, each burning fuel at rates that would have grounded the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47s consumed 300 gal per hour. B-26s burned 200 gal hourly. 1 day's air operations consumed more than Germany's entire offensive allocation. On the night of December 23 to 24, Piper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but immobilized. These were destroyed with remaining ammunition. Oberreiter Heinz Gauls described the scene. "We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gal total. The Obersturmbannführer personally destroyed his command tank. Millions of Reichsmarks of equipment destroyed by empty fuel tanks. Of 5,000 men who began with KF Grouper Piper, approximately 770 returned. They had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, and discovered the truth about Allied logistics. News of Piper's discoveries spread rapidly through German command. On December 26, Field Marshal Walter Model received reports on captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Model's reaction. The field marshal read the quantities twice. 50,000 gallons at Hansfeld, 2 million burned at Stavelot, 8 million destroyed. Rather than captured. He said, "We are not fighting the same war." Hitler, informed December 28, refused to accept reality. Speer wrote, Hitler insisted the numbers were propaganda. When shown photographs of burning Stavelot, he claimed it was Hollywood effects, but lower ranks understood. Greer Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his wife, "Americans destroy more fuel daily than we receive monthly. They drive tanks like we march. This war is lost." The fuel crisis was symptomatic of a larger truth. By 1944, America produced 50% of world manufacturing. A new aircraft every 5 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 7 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were overwhelming. United States 1.8 billion barrels. Soviet Union 110 million barrels. Germany, including synthetic, 33 million barrels. Japan, 2.6 million barrels. The Axis combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Every major German offensive after 1942 had been constrained by fuel. Every American offensive was supported by abundance German planners couldn't conceive. Lieutenant Colonel Chester Hansen recorded a revealing incident December 27. A logistics officer reported weather had reduced fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons daily. There was concern until someone noted this exceeded Germany's total offensive allocation. German prisoners from the Ardennes were more astounded by American extravagance than by their weapons. Observing U.S. soldiers discard partially eaten rations or use gasoline for heating dealt a greater blow to morale than artillery fire. Aust G.A. Reichelm told interrogators, "We understood your production figures in theory, but witnessing troops squander more than we had brought the numbers to life." Every German who saw such casual abundance realized the war was lost. This awareness spread through letters despite strict censorship. Feldwebel Ernstmuller wrote, "Americans wash clothes in gasoline. They feed chocolate to dogs. They fire artillery for Christmas. We cannot contend with infinity." The psychological effect undermined German notions of racial supremacy. How could decadent Americans wield such wealth while the master race scraped by on essentials? During the Nuremberg trials, German officials consistently cited logistics, particularly fuel, as decisive. Field Marshal Kittel testified, "We had operational dominance in 1940-41. By 1944, we could not maneuver our forces for lack of fuel, while Americans shifted armies like chess pieces." Piper's testimony regarding the Malmedy operation was revealing. Every choice after December 17 was constrained by fuel scarcity. We could not maneuver, pursue, or retreat effectively. Americans moved unimpeded while we counted leaders, he explained. General Heinz Guderian observed, when Piper captured 50,000 gallons, critical to him but trivial to Americans, the war was effectively over. This episode exemplifies the point at which industrial warfare determined outcomes. Victories were decided by production capacity, not personal bravery. The romanticized idea of battle perished in the Ardennes amidst empty fuel tanks. Dr. Richard Overy calculated that by 1944, Allied to Axis production ratios exceeded 5-1 in key categories, and in petroleum, nearly 50-1. These disparities could not be offset by superior skill or tactics. During the war, America produced 324,750 aircraft compared to Germany's 119,970, 88,410 tanks versus 46,857. Most strikingly, the U.S. refined 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944 alone, while Germany could muster only 33 million barrels. On December 24, 1944, as Piper's men moved through American lines on foot, abandoning 39 tanks, 70 half-tracks, and 177 other vehicles, the reality became clear. The 50,000 gallons they captured seemed monumental, yet it was inconsequential to an enemy capable of consuming millions. Piper later reflected in 1975, that morning at Hansfeld, finding American fuel felt like winning the lottery. By evening, learning about Stavelot burning, we understood we had already lost. Americans possessed so much they could destroy what we would have risked our lives to secure. That 50,000 gallons amounted to less than a single American armored division consumed in 2 days, less than the Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours, a mere rounding error in daily Allied consumption. Major General J.L. Collins later remarked, "The Germans' desperate attempts to seize fuel exposed their flawed assumptions. They assumed fuel had the same scarcity value to us as it did to them. They could not fathom that we had such abundance that we could afford to burn millions rather than compromise tactical advantage." Operation Watch on the Rhine failed due to the unyielding arithmetic of industrial warfare. The offensive used approximately 2.8 million gallons, 40% of the total allocation, highlighting the negligible effect of captured supplies. During the same period, Americans consumed 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The Wehrmacht lost 100,000 men, 800 tanks, 1,000 aircraft. But most devastating was loss of illusions. Every German witnessing American abundance understood Germany wasn't fighting a war, but participating in its own execution. Jim Piper survived imprisoned until 1956 for war crimes. On July 14, 1976, he was murdered at his French home by unknown assailants. But in 1967, he told historian Henry Lehman, "Finding that depot was the worst thing. If we'd run out earlier, we might have retreated with dignity. Instead, we discovered Americans had oceans while we had drops. We discovered impossibility." The lesson extends beyond World War II. In industrial warfare, logistics supersedes tactics. Production overwhelms courage. Abundance defeats dedication. The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained and more experienced. It didn't matter. Americans were backed by an industrial machine that could waste more than Germany could produce. This truth was encoded in every jerry cannon at Hansfeld, every gallon burned at Stavelot, every pipeline across France. Wars between industrial powers would be won by factories and refineries, not brilliant generals. Colonel Trevor Dupee calculated that in December 1944, each American soldier was supported by 67 of supplies daily. Each German received 3 pounds. Americans complained about waste. Germans would have considered American waste unimaginable abundance. In 1984, 40 years after the battle, veterans gathered at Lays. The museum displays Piper's Tiger tank, still positioned where it ran out of fuel. December 23, 1944, former Unratsea Karl Vortman stood beside the tank with former staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry Division. "We always wondered why you stopped," Anderson said. "We thought it was tactical." Vortman laughed bitterly. "We stopped because tanks were empty. You burned millions to keep it from us. How could we fight that?" Anderson was quiet, then said, "We never knew you were that short. We had so much we never thought about it." That exchange captured December 1944's truth. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One fought for each jerry can, the other burned oceans. The outcome was predetermined. German records provide damning evidence. Army Group B's War Diary, December 1944. December 16, offensive begins. Fuel 70% of minimum. December 17, Piper captures 50,000 gallons. December 18, multiple depots destroyed. 5+ million gallons lost. December 19, fuel critical units immobilized. December 24, Piper abandons vehicles. Fuel exhaustion. Meanwhile, 1st Army reports December 16, reserves 3.7 million gallons. December 17, 2.2 million destroyed. December 18, 1.8 million received. December 24, reserves 4.1 million. Americans treated millions with indifference, Germans reserved for individual cans. Beyond quantity, American fuel represented technological superiority. American refineries perfected catalytic cracking, producing higher octanes more efficiently than German hydrogenation. American 100-octane aviation fuel gave aircraft performance advantages over German planes running 87-octane synthetic. Americans perfected additives Germany couldn't replicate. Tetraethyled, ethylene, diaramide detergents. German engines designed for lower quality often ran poorly on captured American gasoline. Fuel shortage shaped every soldier's experience. Gerrit Hans Müller recorded December 20th. Marched 30 kilometers. No fuel for trucks past abandoned American vehicles with engines running for warmth. They leave engines running. We marched through snow. Medical services were crippled. Ambulances couldn't evacuate wounded. Hospitals couldn't run generators. Men died waiting for transportation that never came. Oberarch Dr. Wilhelm Kirsting testified, "We had excellent surgeons, supplies captured from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men died who could have been saved with 10 kilometers transport." The discoveries shattered German propaganda about American weakness. Soldiers had been told Americans were soft, incapable. Then they discovered Americans could destroy more than Germany possessed. Goebbels's diary, December 28. Reports indicate serious morale problems. Soldiers write about American superiority, undermining our narrative. But stories spread faster than censorship. The myth of German superiority couldn't survive contact. With American logistics, the failure of the Ardennes offensive left Germany with no choice but to fight a desperate defensive war. General Jodl testified at Nuremberg, "After the Ardennes, we realized it was over. We had played our final hand, only to find the enemy held all the winning cards." Recognizing German desperation, the Allies concentrated on destroying fuel production. By February 1945, German fuel output had stopped completely. The Luftwaffe was grounded, pilot training cancelled, and the Wehrmacht became immobile, picked off piece by more mobile Allied forces. Spring 1945 brought almost surreal scenes. Entire German units surrendered due to lack of mobility rather than battlefield defeat. General Major Fritz Baulein recalled, "We had 42 operational tanks, train crews, and ammunition. We had 300 liters of fuel, barely enough for the next town. So we destroyed our vehicles and walked into captivity." Meanwhile, American advances were limited only by congestion caused by their sheer abundance of vehicles. The Third Army alone operated 15,000 trucks. Camp Grouper Piper's fuel dilemma illustrated how industrial capacity dictated the outcome of World War II. When Piper stood among the captured jerrycans that December morning, he confronted the reality: they faced an enemy whose surplus dwarfed their own needs. The numbers spoke for themselves. German offensive fuel allocation, 5 million gallons, fuel destroyed by Americans, 8 million gallons, daily American consumption, 7.5 million gallons, Piper's capture at Hansfeld, 50,000 gallons, only 0.6% of a single day's American supply. The Battle of the Bulge cost 19,000 Americans and perhaps 100,000 Germans, exhausting Germany's final reserves, yet its enduring effect was spreading awareness of American abundance. Piper's discovery was not merely about fuel, it revealed the essence of industrial warfare. Victory belonged to those who produced the most petroleum, steel, and aluminum. Germany had no chance. In a final irony, when American forces catalogued abandoned German equipment at Lays, they found 39 intact tanks left and used solely because of fuel shortages. Major Robert Harrison's salvage report noted, fuel needed, 8,000 gallons. Classification minimal. Source, local reserve. Time, 4 hours. What the Germans could not manage 8,000 gallons to save their best tanks was trivial to the Americans, easily drawn from local reserves far exceeding Piper's peak strength. Hansfeld revealed not just that America had more fuel, but that its industrial abundance operated on a scale that rendered German scarcity irrelevant. The war was effectively over once American industry was fully mobilized. Hans Feld demonstrated a truth that had been clear since 1942. Germany fought the impossible, measuring defeat in gallons, while America measured victory in oceans. Today, the Tiger tank in the Leglaz Museum, its fuel gauge empty, stands as a monument to the moment when tactical brilliance collided with logistical reality and lost. Visitors often ask why such powerful machines were abandoned. The answer is simple: no fuel.